Hey, thank you so much for tuning into the webinar on steps you got to take before you become investable or scalable. I'm here with my co-author, John Spencer Ellis from the book Collaboration Economy. Thank you for being here, John.
It is my pleasure.
Cool. Make sure you guys tune in to the very end. We're going to talk about how you can get a copy of our latest book, Collaboration Economy, for free. All you have to do is just pay the postage. Pretty simple deal there. This book will be released May 6th at its full price, but if you order it before then, you'll be able to get that. Before we do that, let's just jump right into it. As promised, no filler, no fluff. We're going to jump right in. Here are some things that you have to do before you scale your business to such a degree where you would have investors want to build in or buy into your business. You know, John, it's funny. I can't tell you how many times I've seen business owners that either have been in business for maybe less than a year or starting up right away. And the first thing they want to do is they want to go out and get partners. And I'm guilty of doing this myself, by the way. So I'm not preaching or talking about it from a judgmental perspective, but people want to get partners and they want to have people invest into their business to where they can get lots of money up front and they can start scaling their business right away. High tech are probably the biggest sinners of this because they need to have so much money up front just to get the apps ready to go. They try to raise, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million before the business even begins. But here's the sad reality of things. As a business owner, and John, you've seen this before, if you go to an investor and offer them equity share into your business, you have about a 90% chance of not getting the deal you want. Case in point, one of my business partners is Kevin Harrington from the TV show Shark Tank. He wrote the foreword to our book.
That's right.
And I love the show Shark Tank because I like watching it knowing that 65,000 people every week apply to get on that show. And out of that 65,000 people that are applying to get a 90-second spot in front of 5 investors, how many of those 65,000 even get through to the audition phase? Then out of those people who get to the audition phase, how many of those get on to the actual presentation phase? And out of those that actually get onto the presentation phase and actually get to speak in front of the sharks, how many of those get an actual deal? And then out of the ones that get an actual deal, how many of those got the deal they wanted versus the deal they settled for, where they ended up giving away a lot more equity than they wanted to? That's my example of what I mean by 90% of the time, you're not going to get the deal you want. Yet when Kevin Harrington came to me, I didn't have to go chase him down. He came to me and he says, I want to know more about this business. I want to invest. I had a 90% chance of getting the deal that I wanted right from the very beginning. So how do you do that? Well, here's the 4 basic things, and I'm going to use you as an example on this one, John, because you've done all 4 of these things, and the cool thing is that once you do all 4 of these things, sometimes you don't need to scale and have an equity investor anyway. So here's the first thing. The first one is having massive external clarity. Now, most entrepreneurs try to focus on internal clarity. You've seen this before, John, right? Loads of entrepreneurs.
The boards where they put pictures and they have... they have big dreams and big goals, and they'll change the screensaver on their computer and all that.
Oh, down to the detail, the color of the leather interior on their Ferrari, right? They've got massive internal clarity, right? But then when they go tell the world what it is that they want to do, the world just doesn't get it. They don't see the vision as well. External clarity will trump internal clarity any given day of the week. So how do you create massive external clarity? One of the key things for external clarity is to have a very powerful micro niche. So, John, why don't you tell the viewers what's the difference between a niche and a micro niche?
Well, an example would be, my business appeals or provides a service for women.
Okay.
A micro, that would be just a niche.
Niche, yep.
But it's too broad.
Yeah.
And so we need to
no pun intended. You're just for the record, he is not sexist. He did not call women broads there.
Oh, no. So a micro niche narrows it down. So it would be for women who are between 30 and 40 who are going through a divorce, as an example. That would be a micro niche. So you're niching down until you know exactly who your customers are and where to find them.
Yeah. So here's a great example of external clarity. I can't tell you how many authors, speakers, information marketers say this kind of stuff. So here's an example of internal versus external clarity. Somebody might say something like, I'm a peak performance specialist, and I'm going to help you take the quality of your life to the next level so you can tap into the true potential and live the life you've always imagined. That's great internal clarity, but there's no external clarity there whatsoever, right? I don't know what the hell taking your life to the next level is. I don't know what tapping into your true potential is. We all have different definitions of that.
Subjective.
It's very subjective. So here's another example. Another example of external clarity versus the internal clarity. External clarity would be something like this. Hey, my name's Topher. I run a growth accelerator firm. We specialize in working with small business entrepreneurs in the service-based business that do between 500,000 in annual revenue, upwards of 2 million, and have somewhere between 3 to 20 employees. And they've been in the business usually a minimum of about 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, I've got crystal clear clarity, and somebody sits there and goes, I'm an attorney, that's a service. I'm a CPA, I'm a service. I have a hardware store. I sell widgets. I sell nuts and bolts. I don't qualify. So instantly lets you know exactly what you're looking for. That's the first thing, massive external clarity. The second one.
So you know who you will repel, so you know who you'll attract.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, by the way, that's it. You can always tell the power of a niche basically by how well it repels as well as it attracts. The second thing is external credibility. Now, external credibility is an important one because so many times entrepreneurs try to focus all of their energies and their efforts on internal credibility, meaning building themselves up to where they feel confident, they feel confident, they feel secure, they feel powerful, and they build themselves up. And you'll see this, by the way, sometimes in entrepreneurs marketing where you go to their website and their website's more of a brag sheet than a branding page. And it's just talk about how great they are and how amazing they are. And they even try to do things which you would think would give them external credibility, but rarely do, like put pictures of themselves with other people and that kind of stuff. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not going to build up your level of credibility. It's just going to help you have some notoriety at the best.
You want to show how you serve the people that are similar or exactly the same as the people you're also trying to attract at that moment.
Yes, exactly right. Now, there's one surefire way to get massive external credibility, and it has nothing to do, well, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with branding because it's an element in branding, but there's a lot of people who focus on branding without actually having any level of credibility. Here's what it is. The sooner you can become published in a trade journal, a news magazine, an academic publication, or ideally your own book, you will be instantly revered as an expert in that area, whether or not you actually are. And that's kind of the scary part, but it does give you massive levels of credibility.
Well, let's touch on that real briefly. So there's different ways to get published. Obviously, a peer-reviewed journal, especially if you're a professional like a lawyer or a doctor or a scientist. If you're published in peer-reviewed journals, you have massive credibility.
Massive.
If you are writing a book for the consumer, and this is there's a little bit of rhyme and reason for this, but a hardcover book has a lot of credibility. A paperback does as well. Hardcover has a little different perception. A Kindle book is still great, and it's changing, but
not as much. Not as much as a physical.
Not as much.
Yeah.
And then just a PDF ebook that when someone would download, still great information, a little less, and so it's all a little different. But what's important is that you get published. And there's a difference between a best writing author and a best-selling author as well.
Yes.
And a best-selling author is when you have the credibility combined with the marketing.
Yep, absolutely right. John, you're actually a great example of somebody who has a lot of external credibility, especially in the fitness industry. I will be in all corners of the world, whether it's Australia or the UK or the US, and I'd probably say conservatively 7 to 8 times out of 10 when I mention your name to a personal trainer, they know you, like you, love you. They're like, oh, that's amazing. I've got some of his products at home and stuff.
But very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool because here's the thing. You are a master at creating output. You're constantly coming up with new materials, whether it's print or whether it's audio, whether it's video. You do that very, very well. So that's the second thing, getting massive levels of credibility. External credibility, not internal credibility. Now, the third one is an interesting thing. The third one is all about design. Now, I want you to pay attention. For those of you watching right now, this is the most important out of everything. Even though I think the external credibility and external clarity help, this one here is essential. And it's all about designing your business in the right way. John, let's say, for example, I wanted to win the Daytona 500. Let's say I'm a NASCAR fan. I'm not, but let's just hypothetically say I am.
I happen to be a NASCAR fan.
You're weird then, but that's all right, as are the majority of the American population. But let's say I want to win the Daytona 500. And I come to you and I say, listen, I need some investment capital for all the right tools and everything else. I need to get a pit crew. And here's my promise to you, John. I am going to get out there on that track and I'm going to pedal my bike as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to win NASCAR. I'm going to win the Daytona 500. You would immediately immediately put the brakes on and not invest a penny in me because you realize I'm an idiot. Why am I an idiot? I'm an idiot because I've got a bicycle in a NASCAR race, and I don't care how fast I pedal that bicycle. It's not built to go as fast as a NASCAR. Now, how does this work? This is what I mean by this. I've seen a lot of small business owners that their 3 to 5 year goals are NASCAR dreams, and their current business is a bicycle. Let me tell you something. If you start your business out like a bicycle, ain't never going to turn into a NASCAR. You might as well start building it from a NASCAR right from the beginning.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's all about the design. I'll give you a great example of this. I've got one of our mentors in our program that we have over here in our company is a guy named Mike Harris. Now, Mike Harris, in the U.S., some people know his name, but in the U.K., everybody knows this guy's name. This is a guy who's made 3 multi-billion-dollar corporations, taken them all public. He dabbles in $7 to $14 million companies just to learn his lessons and play around. And one thing he'll tell you is that he's never started any of his multi-billion-dollar companies as a small business. They've always, from the very beginning, been built with the architecture of a multi-billion-dollar sustainable business. So look at the business you've created. So here's a great example. I'll give you a real specific one because a lot of people watching this would probably fall prey to this one. Great example of a design flaw, solopreneur. It's the worst business model.
It's a fallacy.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as a self-made man or woman. There are some people who do a lot of it alone. And, this is something that, we talk about in our book, Collaboration Economy, as well.
Yes.
But let me just digress real quickly here. That term came to be, at least I believe, because if someone was self-made, it would indicate that their parents did not give them the silver spoon.
Yeah.
But no person, no athlete, no individual, no billionaire, no highly successful entrepreneur did it alone. You can't do it. And that's why we're always talking about how to collaborate effectively to do more good, to have a big bank account, but a small business, but one with the framework and structure like you're talking about.
Yep.
So, real quick, what's important is that you're talking about creating the foundation right from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you were going to, you want to build a 10-story building, but you've only built the foundation, the slab of concrete thick enough to support a one-story home with no water bed on the second floor, right?
Yep. Yeah.
and if you did anything more than that, it would crash down.
Yeah.
So build the foundation because it gives you structure. I always say plant oak trees, as a metaphor.
Yeah.
Flowers are pretty, but oak trees give you support and structure and integrity and shelter. So plant the oak trees from the beginning by doing these things that Topher is talking about right now.
Yeah, it's a big deal because a lot of too many people just start their business off small, going, well, this is all I got the budget for. Well, listen, to sit there and build it small from the very beginning makes no sense. It's a bit like sitting there going, I'm gonna get on the football field, I'm gonna go score a touchdown, and then once I get a touchdown, then I'm gonna go recruit the team.
And train.
And train. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So design flaws are a big mistake. You got to design it for scale. Design it in a way that makes it scalable. Here's an example, by the way, of a way where people have a bad design in the scalability. They build their business, but they have no policies and procedures in their company whatsoever. Yeah. You go to an investor and you try to scale your business, one of the first questions they're going to ask you after they've asked you who's on your team, like your attorneys and your CPAs and everything else, the first thing they're going to say is, show me your policies and procedures manual. And if you don't have one, you haven't built that business to scale because you disappear, all the information disappears.
Yeah, it's not replicable as well. And scalability and reproducibility, replicability, which is tough to say but easier to do, is really important, and they work in concert together. Yep. So you cannot scale what you cannot reproduce. But what you create your structure with at the beginning is what will be replicated and reproduced and scaled and grown. Yeah. But if you don't have that base and that foundation, you're in serious trouble. So, the question I would ask you for our viewing audience right now is, do you have the right foundation? Do you feel that you're always going back and doing it's kind of like an old building and you keep okay, well, that nail's coming out, I better pound that in. Well, I need a lean-to put it up against this 4x4 post because this has fallen down. Are you doing all this rigging to make sure that it's not falling down instead of saying, let me start by putting in this 8-inch concrete slab with double rebar and 12-foot footers.
Yep.
and then build the foundation. Yeah. So if you need to go back and do that, then go back and do that.
Exactly right. By the way, John, you said something about, you referenced our book. So for those of you watching right now, if you want to get a copy of our book, Collaboration Economy, just simply go to the website collaborationeconomy.com. Spell it just like it sounds. If you don't know how to spell collaboration or economy, you're probably too dumb to get the information out of the book anyway. It's a competency test. So collaborationeconomy.com. You can get the book for free. All you have to do is just pay the postage right now. After May 6th, it's actually going up to its full price. And even if you're on Amazon Prime where you don't have to pay for shipping, the cost of the book is still more than our postage. So might as well get it right now if you like the information you're hearing. Let's talk about the fourth one. There's by the way, I also want to roll some credits. We talk about collaboration. None of this information would even be coming to you guys right now had it not been from the collaborative efforts of one of my business partners, Daniel Priestley, who has a program called Key Person of Influence. I want to put a plug out for that because he's really the genius behind all of this information I'm sharing with you right now. The fourth and the final thing here, before you have to have partnerships or seek partnerships, is what we call visibility. You know, the greatest legal shame for any small business owner is having the world's best product or service, but nobody knows who you are. It's a true shame. Visibility is an interesting thing. What happens, John, is when you're invisible, you have only one game you can play called chasing. So you have to go find the investors, find the customers, find the sales, find the prospects, you find the employees. You have to chase. When you're visible, though, all those people come to you. When you're visible, you can just basically stand back and those individuals will approach you. It's the difference between chasing and cherry picking. So when you're visible, you get to cherry pick the people you want to work with. You get to cherry pick the partners you want to have. You get to cherry pick the customers you're going to work with. It just becomes a much more effortless life. And any investor, they're going to come to you and they're going to want to know, what's the 5-year game plan and is it clearly labeled out? That's your clarity. Are you the person that I want to invest in? That's the credibility. Is the business designed to scale, or am I going to be wasting my time on a permanently small business? And then fourth and foremost, did I find you or did you find me? Here's an interesting thing, John. The biggest problem that venture capitalists have right now is they have more than enough money to go around and they don't know who to invest it in. That's their biggest problem because they're constantly getting bombarded by people that are uninvestable. So they don't want to work with those individuals. What do they have to do? They have to go out and find them. So they're looking for the ones to invest. You don't want to knock on their door. You want them to knock on yours.
Well, that brings me to the next point. And you tell me. I think we can touch on it now, and then we can in our next webinar we can discuss it further.
Sure.
But the importance of not just having one product or service. You don't want to be a one-trick pony. So right. I want to indulge in this for a second. If you say, okay, so we could have done it in the next webinar, but you guys get it now.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, this is design. What you're talking about is actually all part of design. Unsuccessful companies have one product or service. Yeah. Successful companies have 4.
Well, and the good example of this is Apple, because Apple has always made really cool stuff, and they were always popular with the people who use their product, but they didn't have enough diversity in their products to appeal to a wider range of people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it now, I mean, they have different buckets. They have their desktop and their laptop. They have their tablet, their phones, their music, and then iTunes is they have the so for continuity for people coming back. They have the giveaway stuff like podcast. And then digital magazines,
which maintenance and service
an industry
plans.
that I'm actually entering in right now as well. And so they have all these different ways of people to collaborate
mm-hmm.
and use a wide variety of their products. But when they're a one-trick pony, if something changes in the economic climate, if new legislation is passed, if a technology is outdated, if a better technology emerges and trumps that, I mean,
you can actually get rid of if. You can say when.
HD DVD.
Yeah. It's never even if. It's when a new technology develops. Yeah.
That's true.
I remember I was watching Jeff Bezos on an interview with Jeff Bezos. He said the only reason why Amazon is at the top is because we have the best technology right now. He said it's inevitable. Somebody's going to come along with a better technology than us, and they're going to beat us. And it was funny. The interviewer says, "Do you worry about that?" And he goes, "No, I don't worry about it. It's inevitable. It's going to happen." He goes, "I hope it happens after I die, but I know it's going to happen, right?" Yeah, it always happens. Yeah.
So the important thing is always be innovating,
mm-hmm.
always be on the cutting edge. Try and test new things, collaborate with people that may have a technology when that is appropriate, when the timing's right, when the money's right, and when the investors are right. And also, don't be that one-trick pony. So, to you, the viewer watching this, I'm asking you, are you a one-trick pony? Do you have one product, one service, one little tiny thing that what if you got bumped off of Google for that one thing?
Yeah.
What if your supplier for that one thing went out of business? Maybe they had a fire in their business. Maybe the business is sold. Maybe your supplier had a death in the family or the owner or something.
What if legislation changes and makes that product illegal?
Yeah, or obsolete in other ways. So what do you do? So you have to be always on the search for something new. And you say 4. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, those are the 4 main things that you got to have before you become investable. You've got to have external clarity, external credibility. You've got to have a design to scale, and then you've got to have the visibility. And if you have those 4 things, then you don't have to worry about chasing down an investor. They'll come to you. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Well, you know what? I say we wrap this up. We're going to keep it tight and bright for everyone.
Yep.
But why don't you let them know how they can get our new book, Collaboration Economy, for no cost. You just pay the postage, and I think it's like $6.95 or something like that.
Something like that for the U.S. And then,
but we're also giving them 2 comprehensive, full-length training videos to help them grow their business. Well, let me clarify. You don't necessarily always want a big business. You want a big bank account and a small, efficient business, which is fun to operate.
There we
go. We're going to show you how to do that.
Yeah, well done. All right, guys, so go to collaborationeconomy.com. That's where you can get a copy of our latest book for free. All you have to do is just pay the postage, which I think is fair, and we'll send you the book. It's a physical book. It's not an ebook, and you're going to love it. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.